Güey, a lo mejor me iban a matar, güey. En una hora regreso. ¿Y en qué venía? ¿En moto?
Do you know that feeling when something just doesn't sit right? That quiet whisper in the back of your mind that says, hey, maybe you shouldn't open that door. Valeria Marquez had that feeling, but by the time she listened to it, it tragically was all too late. If you don't know who that is, Valeria was a rising influencer in Mexico, and she was beautiful, confident, smart, and hardworking. She was becoming quite popular too, and tens of thousands of people would tune into her every day on TikTok. Now, this day, which was just a regular day in May of 2025, began like any other workday. Valeria was walking to the salon which she ran and owned, just usual routine stuff. But as she walked through those front doors, something immediately seemed off. Someone had stopped by earlier apparently. A man said he had a package for her, but the strange thing is, nobody knew who he was or what the package could be. I mean, Valeria even admitted that she hadn't ordered anything. Weird, right? Later that day, and while she was live streaming, just chatting casually with her audience, she actually brought it up. She looked confused and a little unsettled, and even said on camera, "That's strange, I didn't order anything." But curiosity has a way of beating caution, and so she waited, she stayed on livestream, and when that man came walking back, everything changed. Because right there, in the middle of that livestream, and in full view of her entire audience, Valeria was murdered in cold blood. This was almost certainly calculated, and everyone was there to see it in real time. At first, there were actually people who believed it was a twisted prank or some sort of skit, but over time, the facts revealed themselves, and people soon realized that whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Today's case is one of the most chilling intersections between content and crime, a moment where the screen stopped becoming a barrier and reality hit hard instead. And trust me, it is not just Valeria. In recent years, livestream homicides have surged across the world, with influencers, streamers, and everyday people becoming victims while the camera still rolls. And every time this happens, not only does it shake a community, but it raises serious questions about privacy. So today, we're going to do something a little bit different on this channel and look at this newfound phenomenon. We'll begin with Valeria's case, and then look at a few other stories that have happened in recent years. And not only will we look at the motive and psychological factors behind each killer, but we'll take a look at the societal and cultural ones too, and see if there is anything we can do to stop this trend. Welcome back to Coffeehouse Crime, folks. My name is Adrian, and if you like true crime with the heaviness it deserves, then please consider subscribing. Now, with that said, please grab yourself a coffee. This is the case of Valeria Marquez and the livestream murders. Before the fame, the followers, and the flashing lights, Valeria Marquez was just a small girl from Jalisco. Born in 2001, she grew up in a modest household on the outskirts of Guadalajara. Her mother worked long hours while her father was often absent, and Valeria, both bright-eyed and stubborn, learned early how to hold her own. She was the kind of girl who turned school uniforms into fashion statements, and one who knew how to draw attention. By her late teens, she had carved out a space online, and what started with makeup tutorials in her bedroom mirror, which were shot on a cracked iPhone and lit with fairy lights, would soon turn into something far larger. She seemed to have that spark, and before she knew it, she had become a rising influencer in Guadalajara. After that, her platforms would grow quickly, and by 2023, her TikTok and her Instagram had become rather recognizable. But Valeria was smart. She didn't want to rely solely on her platforms, and so instead, she used them to her advantage to build her own tangible empire. That is when she conceived the idea of having her own salon, and fast forward several months, she had used the money she had earned through her platforms, and more specifically through sponsorships, to found Blossom the Beauty Lounge. Blossom was the result of all of her hard work, and for a young woman of only 23 years old, she was doing it all. She was a model, an entrepreneur, a business manager, and an influencer, some that many people in her age would consider a symbol of self-made success. On her Instagram page, now with more than 500,000 followers, Valeria can be found posing in her business scrubs, on top of luxurious yachts, and even on board private jets. Meanwhile, on TikTok, she had amassed over 110,000 followers. But behind the glossy reels and the storefront, there were now whispers, and in the early months of 2025, many of Valeria's friends claimed that she had become more nervous. She looked over her shoulder more often, would cancel appointments last minute, and, even more concerningly, would create cryptic stories on her Instagram which often expressed feelings of betrayal, anger, and danger. It is quite evident that there were all sorts of bad things going on for Valeria. She would sometimes talk about fake friends and even a bad relationship gone wrong. But what is worse is that sometimes she would highlight that she was being threatened. Now, all of this information was kept between Valeria and her friends, and she would never talk about this online, at least not directly. Meanwhile, on the internet, she would simply just smile for the camera and persevere. Of course, until one day, everything stopped. That day would be May the 13th, 2025. It is hard to know how exactly the morning began for Valeria, but many believe that she must have received some bad news between the evening before and the moment she walked to the store. She had started her morning stream by saying that she was very tired, and some of her viewers could even tell that something was on her mind. But the truth is that we don't quite know what she was worried about, if anything at all. All that we do know is that it's clear that she was not prepared for the afternoon ahead. After live streaming that morning, Valeria returned to her salon, found in Zapopan, which is 10 miles west of Guadalajara. And after serving a few clients that day, she once again returned to live streaming. Now, at first, everything did seem normal. She was holding a plush toy while she chatted casually to her fans. But even still, you could tell that Valeria did seem to be uneasy. It is in that moment that she told her fans about an unusual encounter. Someone had visited the salon while she was out that morning, claiming that they had an expensive gift for her. This was odd because Valeria had not ordered anything online. Not only that, but she wasn't expecting a present from anyone. The driver would apparently reattempt delivery later that afternoon, and her friend, who was with her at the time and in the salon, had also told Valeria to sit tight and wait. It was only a couple of minutes later, and several minutes into the stream, that everything changed. After noticing a man with a box approach the shop, you can see that Valeria looked towards the door. Moments later, a man entered the salon, where viewers could hear him ask one question, that being, "Are you Valeria?" And before she could respond, he pulled out a gun. Censoring the video from here on out, the gunman then fired 3 shots into Valeria, with one hitting her chest, one to the neck, and one to the head. She then collapsed, dying instantly. And although the stream continued for several more moments, it would then abruptly end, but only after the camera had captured a glimpse of her friend switching it off. And I don't know about you, but she does not seem particularly shocked either. Emergency services arrived quickly, but sadly, there was no chance of saving Valeria. The gunman fled the scene immediately, with a getaway driver on a motorbike waiting for him outside. And, at the time of making this video, no arrests have been made. This story is already devastating, but if you think that it ends here, think again, because the rumors surrounding her death, the culture that shaped it, and the way that the internet responded will leave you horrified. So, with this case happening very recently, let's first begin with the rumors. Now, word is on the street that Valeria had actually found herself in a romantic relationship with a man who is known to be quite dangerous, and his name is Ricardo Velasco, also known as Double R. From what we know, Double R is a high-ranking member of the Jalisco cartel, meaning that Valeria could have been romantically connected to one of the most dangerous men in the country. Now, it's speculated that Ricardo grew jealous of Valeria when he noticed that so many of her fans were buying her expensive gifts, and that apparently led to a breakdown in the relationship. And so, many people believe that he actually planned to have her assassinated, hiring a couple of his thugs in the cartel to take her out for him. So, you might be wondering, why would he do such a thing? Because not only does that seem to be extremely brazen, but also way over the top. Unfortunately, this comes down to cultural and societal factors within Mexico. And so, on that note, let's take a look at their murder rate. By the way, I find this stat to be absolutely insane, but in Mexico, a staggering 96% of all murders will go unpunished. It seems that the main reasons for this are corruption and several state deficiencies. And with a mere 4% chance of getting caught and put in prison for murder, this does seem to give tremendous power to gang members and other violent people. So, it is certainly possible that if someone has the means and they are willing to hedge their bets, then they will gladly bet on murder. We also need to talk about femicide here, or gender-based violence, because in Mexico, it is not just the staggering levels of impunity that allow it to thrive, but also a deeply ingrained culture of hyper-masculinity that fuels it. Add corruption into the mix, where police often turn a blind eye to both gang violence and crimes against women, and tragically, you are left with a recipe for absolute disaster. Authorities are currently investigating this as a possible femicide, which, to be honest, does seem like a very fair assumption. They believe her killer did not know her personally, mainly because he had to ask her for her name. So, on one hand, this could have been a deranged fan, but on the other, it might also have been a hit, a murder for hire. To add to this story, there are also alleged leaked messages which are now circulating online. Messages which claim that one of Valeria's friends might have been involved. Now, that theory does make sense, considering it was her friend who ended the livestream after Valeria was shot, and if you remember, she seemed to look very nonchalant when she turned off the camera. Now, according to these messages, it seems that her friend was afraid of being caught, and if they are to be believed, then several people may have conspired to see Valeria dead. But what makes this even more disturbing is what happened after she was murdered. The video of Valeria's death can still be found everywhere online, not only being easily found on Telegram and X, but other websites too. I think it took me all of 10 seconds to find, which is just absolutely maddening. This entire story is horrifying, in fact, and honestly, I feel so sorry for Valeria, because she was failed in life, and then again in death. I mean, her story shines a light on so many deeply rooted and disgusting modern-day issues, including gender-based violence, Mexico's impunity rate, victim blaming, and the sheer lack of accountability on social media platforms. And so, although this case is unsolved, do I think we should be talking about it here? Yes, absolutely. There are so many problems here. Now, obviously, social media cannot stop violence from happening in real time. However, one thing they can control is how much it is amplified after the fact, and that is something that they consistently fail to moderate. It's not just about trying to moderate that content, but also all of the hateful comments that follow. And sadly, this case is not so unique either, and there are so many stories like this already out there. Now, I won't talk about this one for too long because I've already covered it only a few weeks ago, but many of you will be aware of the story of Irie Sato. On the morning of March the 11th, 2025, 22-year-old Japanese live streamer Irie Sato was fatally stabbed while live streaming in Tokyo's Takadanababa district. It was shortly before 10 AM when she was murdered while recording herself walking a full loop of the Yamanote line. Her killer, who was identified as 42-year-old Kenichi Takano, made no effort to flee from the crime scene after stabbing her several times. However, what makes this case so interesting is the backstory behind these two. I do want to say that Irie never deserved to die, but she did severely wrong Kenichi in the past, and that's what makes this story a revenge killing. As the story goes, Kenichi claimed that he had lent Irie more than 2 million yen, which is equivalent to roughly $13,500 over the course of several months, and when she failed to repay him, well, that's when things got ugly. This included her ignoring a court order which ruled that she had to pay him back, and even ridiculing him on livestream. Several weeks later, Irie sustained multiple stab wounds to her face, neck, and torso. She was then rushed to the nearby hospital, but tragically was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. Authorities could then confirm that the cause of her death included a fatal injury to her neck. After being arrested, Kenichi admitted that it was quite easy to track her down because all he had to do was follow her livestream. Not only that, but she made it quite obvious that she was touring the Yamanote line because she'd mentioned it several times. No surprise, but this incident sparked widespread concern over the safety and privacy of live streamers. Now, of course, this is not an isolated event, and there are plenty of other streamers out there who have already experienced this problem. And so, on a lighter note, there is no better time than to talk about streamer Johnny Somali. Johnny's the kind of guy who lowers the average IQ of any room he enters, including empty ones. And when he was targeted, there was kind of a reason for it. Johnny Somali, whose real name is Ramzi Ismail, is notorious for his provocative and disgusting behaviour abroad. His content typically involves provoking locals, mocking cultures, and deliberately stirring controversy in the name of views. While the shock value format is not new to streaming, Johnny seems to have taken it to an extreme. Most of you will know him already, but during his time in Japan, he deliberately antagonized bystanders by shouting phrases like Hiroshima Nagasaki in crowded areas. In another incident, he entered libraries and subways only to shout racist or obscene phrases and intentionally tried to disrupt the peace. Throughout this time, he was repeatedly detained by police in Japan, including a brief arrest in Osaka in 2023, which then led to his deportation from the country and a ban on re-entering. And so, what did he do next? He went to South Korea. In late 2024, his actions in South Korea drew massive backlash. One of his most notoriously disgusting acts was mocking the Statue of Peace, which, if you didn't know, commemorates Korean victims of wartime and sexual slavery. No surprise, but the response from locals was fierce, and public outrage reached a boiling point. In fact, it would ultimately end with Korean YouTuber and former Navy SEAL Dal Gun-yu beating the baloney out of him. The vast majority of people seem to agree that Johnny had that punch coming. But whether you agree or disagree if the assault was justified or not, what really seems to stand out here is that, yet again, a streamer was not only tracked down, but then physically attacked. And yet again, social media failed to step in before it got too far. I mean, let's be honest here, Johnny should have never been monetized for this kind of slop in the first place. Not only did platforms allow him to profit off of cultural disrespect and harassment, but they gave him a megaphone in the process. And the result was that tens of thousands of people were offended, and Johnny got a black eye. Following the punch, Dalgian was fined $7,000 for the assault, but the internet simply was not having it. Support poured in, and his fees were basically covered by hundreds of donations. And this even included a $4,000 donation from YouTuber Donut Operator. God bless you, sir. Meanwhile, Johnny faces legal troubles of his own. In fact, he's actually stuck in Korea while he faces multiple charges for his disruptive behavior. I think that's just good karma. As for Dal Gun-yu, he would later say that he just did what any Korean citizen would do. And considering the amount of support he's received, it looks like most people agree. Back into the world of rivalry, there is one other case that I would like to talk about today, which I've known for a couple years, but have never had the opportunity to discuss. And that is the case of Gan So-jong, also known as Fatty Goes to Africa. Gan So-jong was not your typical content creator. He wasn't flashy, wasn't chasing trends, and was not trying to be special. And yet, despite his candid nature, he captured the hearts of millions of people. Better known online as Fatty Goes to Africa, Gan was a Chinese live streamer who had carved out a niche by doing something refreshingly simple. He shared the world through his own eyes and ears. A rather stocky guy with a beaming smile and a bottomless appetite, Gan travelled through countries that most influencers skipped over. Africa was his canvas. Its people, its street food, and its vibrant everyday life were all documented in real time for his fans back in China. Whether he was sampling something wildly spicy from a street vendor, or simply laughing with a local who barely spoke his language, Gan seemed to make you feel like you were right there beside him. And it worked, because by late 2022, he had amassed nearly 5 million followers on Chinese platforms like Douyin and Kaoshu. His fans called him Little Fatty, a nickname that seemed to somehow capture both affection and charm. And with his popularity, it is no surprise to learn that tens of thousands of people tuned in daily to see where he would wander to next. But it wasn't just the destinations that kept people coming back, it was Gan himself, because he was genuine and unfiltered. You could feel the curiosity in his voice and the warmth behind his grin. And off camera, those who knew him described him as generous, endlessly curious, and always up for one more adventure. But behind the streams, and behind the easy laughter and cultural snapshots, there was something that his followers never saw. Gan had made an enemy, someone who had stood beside him but now carried a dangerous grudge. And as we will soon learn, that grudge would follow him halfway across the world. To understand how a livestream could end in murder, we must first rewind. back to a time when he met a man named Feng Shengyong. So, Gan met Feng during one of his travels through Africa, and since both of them were Chinese nationals and also content creators, things started off quite well. In fact, Gan would even help Feng during his earlier years, not only giving him advice, but also helping him grow an audience. And as a larger creator lending a hand to a smaller one, that was incredibly beneficial for Feng. However, that mentorship was not sustainable because, as it turns out, the two had wildly different personalities. And hey, there's nothing unusual or even bad about that. Sometimes it just takes a while to figure these things out. But Feng wasn't the type to accept rejection or second place. And when Gan's following turned into the millions, he started to grow bitter. No one is sure what precisely happened afterwards, but there are rumors that there were many feuds between the two, and being the resentful man that Feng is, he was not prepared to let go. It was around this time that Feng began to spread accusations. He began to claim that apparently Gan would poison his food with COVID, had stolen his money to buy a mobile phone, and had even hired people to trash his house. It is worth noting that none of this was ever proven, but it did paint a picture of someone who seemed to be spiraling into obsession. By the end of 2022, and what had initially began as a friendship had now turned into a dangerous rivalry, one that seemed to be laced with paranoia, jealousy, and deep-seated hatred. Gan, for his part, did seem to brush it off and never made any issue of it online. He kept traveling, kept streaming, and never showed much concern. Maybe he thought that all of it was just noise. And Feng, well, that anger seemed to be eating him alive. And soon, instead of keeping their feud private, he would turn it into something very public. The date was December the 4th, 2022, and just another day on the road for Gan. By now, he was in Kathmandu in Nepal, live streaming from the heart of the city. The air was bright, and the market was alive with colour, and Gan, who was joined by his two companions, a fellow Chinese traveller, Li Chuzan, and a local guide, wandered through the busy streets of Indrachowk Square, a maze of temples, vendors, and curious tourists. As usual, Gan was upbeat, cracking jokes, chatting with friends, and showing off the food stalls and street scenes. Thousands of viewers had tuned in live, watching him as he laughed and explored with his people. Just another carefree stream from Fat Egos to Africa, or so it seemed. Just out of frame, and unknown to him at the time, Feng was just behind him, watching from a distance. Instead of playing the rest of the video here, I'm just going to loop the non-violent part. But only moments later, viewers heard a scream while the camera jolted. Shaky footage would catch a flash of panic. And then there was chaos. Some people believed that Gan had tripped, while others were not sure what they were seeing. But the screams, they were unmistakable. Right there, in the middle of the street, he had been stabbed in the chest and stomach by his former friend and peer. And as Gan's phone fell to the floor, the livestream spun before it cut to black. In a matter of seconds, a light-hearted travel vlog had turned into something far more serious. This was now an active murder in progress, broadcasted live for thousands to see. Meanwhile, Feng decided not to run. Instead, he was pacing around while yelling horrible things like, "You should have died long ago." Amidst the chaos, Gan's friend Li had also been stabbed, who lay nearby, crying out for someone to help him. Eventually, locals stepped in. Some rushed to Gan's side, while others tackled Feng to hold him down until the police arrived. Within minutes, sirens blared through the market. Paramedics then lifted Gan into an ambulance and rushed him to the National Trauma Center. Back online, thousands of fans were still shocked. The livestream had cut off so suddenly, and many were still left wondering if what they saw was actually real or some horrifying hoax. Messages poured in on his livestream asking, "Is Gan okay, and was that real?" For a few hours, there was hope, but sadly, later that night, the news unfortunately broke that he had died from his injuries. And despite the emergency surgery that he was given, the stab wounds that he had received were simply too catastrophic. Although his friend Li spent several days in critical condition, he would eventually pull through, so physically he recovered, but emotionally, that's another story. Meanwhile, Feng was obviously arrested on the spot. Apparently, he still had the knife in his hand. police took him into custody, where they then charged him with murder and attempted murder. So, circling back to our recurring theme here, Feng admitted that he had tracked Gan through his livestream and then struck him at the optimal time. In addition to this, it is also worth acknowledging that he has shown no remorse in his actions and doesn't deny them either. And so, although he is yet to stand trial, he will very likely spend life behind bars. Meanwhile, the news of Gan's death dominated social media, and the story was so devastating that it even traversed language barriers and hit Western media. It would even become one of the most talked about true crime cases in China, not simply because it was shocking, but because it was painfully deeply human. You have to understand that Gan's murder did not simply take a life, but shook an entire industry. To see someone killed in real time while streaming to tens of thousands of people is simply horrible. And it forced a harsh question into the spotlight. How safe are content creators really? In China, where live streaming is absolutely massive and often a full-time job, this was a wake-up call. Influencers suddenly had to reckon with the dark side of internet fame, where clout, competition and envy aren't simply online dramas, but have very real consequences too. For streamers, this was personal. Many admitted that they regularly shared their live locations without ever giving it second thought, something that Gan often did. But after this, well, that all seemed to change. Some began to call for stream delays or safer ways to film in public, this seeming to be the only possible solution so that they could not be tracked in real time. Unlike Western platforms, Chinese platforms seemed to scrub the footage almost immediately. Regulators were praised for their quick response, but all the same, they also used this moment to push for tighter conduct. Suddenly, the pressure wasn't only on creators, but on the platforms themselves. And unfortunately, this pressure is yet to be addressed by anyone. And what about us, the viewers? How do we deal with the psychological impact of watching someone we know die live on camera? Well, shock and morbid curiosity aside, it is actually quite hard to tell. While some people say this merely desensitizes them, others say that they require therapy. What we do know is that live-streamed murders do seem to force us to confront the hard truths about our societies, because quite bluntly, there is no way around it. And I'm just going to put it out there, but for example, it shines a harsh spotlight on Mexico's gender-based violence. All of these stories show the need for greater caution, and through this investigation, I think that is the main thing to take away here, that all social media platforms require more moderation. Before I go, I think we need to take this moment to remember the lives lost in these stories. It is very easy to become numb to headlines, but we must not forget these people, all of which were taken in moments that the whole world was never meant to see. Valeria, Ari and Gan were more than just content creators. They all had full, complex and emotional lives beyond the screen. Lives that were cut short simply because they dared to share them online. And I think that's pretty much all I have today, folks. I just wanted to spark some discussion here because, honestly, this topic has been on my mind for a while. Before you go, I do have 2 questions for you. To begin with, do you think we can ever stop live-streamed violence from happening? And if not, what are the ways that we can curb or prevent it? This format was slightly different to the usual while I'm trying to experiment with new things, and so it always helps if you let me know what you think. With all of that said, if you'd like to share your thoughts or opinions, please leave something in the comments down below. And also, if you'd like to support me in the channel, check out my Patreon here, or alternatively, my social media here. And look who's joined me in the final moments. I think all of you are due a Nero update anyway. Alright, I think that's me done for today, folks. Thank you so much for watching, I really do appreciate it. And as always, I'll see you again very soon in another video. Until that moment arrives though, remember to look after yourselves, look after each other, and stay curious. Thank you. Take care. Goodbye.